Our vision as an agency, as a mission agency, is to see the peoples of Europe transformed in the name of Jesus. That's what we're about. That's what we want to see. And hopefully, as we go through things this morning, you'll see some of the ways in which we are attempting to do that. Back in the spring, some of you will know, we went to our conference, and that is the ECMI family, as we met in the south of Spain for a week. There were 538 of us there, I think it was, all told. That included children, but it's quite a large group of people who come from various different places, different nationalities. So we have over 30 nationalities. I'm not quite sure how many it is now. It seems to grow quite regularly. We have 221 actual missionaries on the ground, and then well, I'm not quite sure how many hundreds of other partners, but we won't bother with that too much. And we operate in 25 different countries in Europe. That's not the whole of Europe, as some of you will know. There are at least 40 countries in Europe, depending on how you count a country. And if you want to know more about how you count a country, please talk to somebody else. There is a long history of sharing the good news of Jesus in the continent of Europe. It's a history that goes back very nearly 2,000 years. And over the past little while here at Wellsprings, we have been looking at a letter from Paul the Apostle to the church in Philippi in what is now modern Greece. And I thought it might be an idea if we had just a brief look at the passage that tells us how the good news came to Europe. Some of you may have heard me speak on this before, but I'm not going to apologize for repeating it because it fits in with what we've been doing as a church. We in ECMI like to think of ourselves as continuing the work that Paul started all of those years ago. And so we're going to read just a very short passage from Acts chapter 16, which is about when Paul first comes to Europe. One of the things I think we sometimes forget is, of course, Christianity is an Asian faith. It started in Asia. We like to think of it as being European and everybody involved having blonde hair and blue eyes, but that's not necessarily the case. So, Acts 16, verses 11 to 15. They are up there, but if you have your Bibles, you might like to look at them. Let me read those for you now. From Troas, we, that is Paul and Luke and another group and some more people, we put out to sea and sailed straight for Samothrace. And the next day we went on to Neapolis. From there we travelled to Philippi, a Roman colony, and the leading city of that district of Macedonia. And we stayed there several days. On the Sabbath, we went outside the city gate to the river, where we expected to find a place of prayer. We sat down and began to speak to the women who'd gathered there. One of those listening was a woman from the city of Thyatira named Lydia, a dealer in purple cloth. She was a worshipper of God. The Lord opened her heart to respond to Paul's message. When she and the members of her household were baptized, she invited us to her home. "If you consider me a believer in the Lord," she said, "come and stay at my house." And she persuaded us. The Lord will bless the reading of his word. So the gospel comes to Europe. And it comes with Paul to the city of Philippi. And hopefully you can see Philippi up there in the top right-hand corner of the picture. And when Paul arrives there, he seeks to do one thing, and that is to share the good news of Jesus. And so to do this, on the Sabbath, he goes outside the city walls, the town walls, to the river in order to look for a group of people who may well be praying, who are God-fearers, worshippers of God. I'm going to suggest that physical location actually tells us something very important about the gospel. The people that Paul talks to are outside the city. And what Paul, I think, and Luke, as he tells this story, is exploring is how those who are not part of the very heart of everything in that culture and that society, they are the people that the good news reaches. They're the people that the good news is for. Paul finds a group of people who are there. They're worshipping God. They appear to be only women. And one of them is Lydia. Lydia is a central character in the story of the gospel coming to Europe and to Philippi. Some of you who have been Christians for a long time, brought up in Sunday school, you will remember the story of the Philippian jailer. Who remembers the story of the Philippian jailer? Jolly good. How many of you in Sunday school were told about Lydia? One. Okay, two. Good. Excellent. Not everybody. Which I think is very telling, but let's not go there this morning, eh? Lydia, the first person to come to know Christ in the story of the spread of the gospel in Luke's account, is a woman. And a woman who is outside of society, not part of the center of society. I think that says such a lot about our God and who the good news reaches. We'll come back to Lydia a little bit later. But I mentioned that ECMI works in 25 different countries, and they are there on the screen in various shades of delightful green. And part of my role with ECMI is to travel around and to visit the missionaries in the places where they are working, to spend time with them, to bring Bible teaching, to pray with them, and basically to bring fellowship and encouragement where and when I can. The countries that have got stars in them, that's not because I like those countries better than any others, but they're the countries that in the last 3 years I've visited at least once to see the missionaries of ECMI. Some of them I've visited more than once. And this morning, what I want to do is I want to have a look at 3 of those countries briefly, and to see various aspects of what ECMI does and what the missionaries on the field are actually doing. So we're going to go firstly to Romania. Some of you will know Romania. Some of you may well have visited Romania. If not, you've probably come across Romanians in the UK. There's a large population of Romanians in the UK. So what we're going to do is we're going to just watch a short video of some of the work that ECMI missionaries are doing in the country of Romania.
Welcome to Romania. Here's a snapshot of how God has been working across the country through ECM workers.
I'm Alexa Colman. I am from France and I work in Romania, Timișoara.
Hi, I'm Liz.
And I'm Alex.
I'm from New Zealand.
And I'm from Romania.
And God brought us together in an amazing way in Romania. And now as a family, we serve in Ternavoda.
Hi, we are Adi and Jennifer Gocot. I'm Romanian and Jennifer is from Australia, serving in Timișoara, Romania.
Hello, we are Jeroen and Marike working in Romania as a Dutch family, already for 15 years. We are part of the local church in Câmpina.
Hello, I'm Ionel and my wife Simona Morariu. We have 2 kids and we live in Timișoara, Romania.
I seek to equip people through biblical counseling.
We are trying to walk along the young people of Cernavodă and involve them in a social enterprise to change lives and towards the kingdom of God.
I also seek to work alongside family in my church small group.
Here in Romania, we are partnering with Child Evangelism Fellowship to encourage and equip children's ministry workers.
We publish Christian books to equip Christian pastors, professors of theology, and students.
We enjoy to be part of the leadership in the church, to run the soup kitchen, and to do some children evangelistic outreaches.
We reach out to children in different neighborhoods. Discipleship is also on the spot, just helping others to grow when they are serving.
Is God surrounding us with different people to support us and encourage us, whether it's been in our private lives, the lives of our children, or within ministry. We are so thankful for the people that God has brought around us to support us and encourage us and equip us for the work that God is helping us do here in Romania.
Multe dintre cărțile noastre au devenit bestseller. În felul acesta, Dumnezeu ne-a confirmat călăuzirea în alegerea cărților potrivite. Este o nevoie foarte mare de resurse creștine sănătoase, de teologie și consiliere creștină în limba română.
I have seen God's faithfulness through a time of poor health when He has shown me that the most important thing to Him is my relationship with Him, not what I do.
In providing whatever is needed for the ministry and for us as well as a family. For example, in the soup kitchen, we never have lack of any food to give to the people, and also with our human resources, we have a lot of volunteers with whom we can do the work together. So God is faithful and we do thank Him.
Thank you for your partnership in the gospel in Romania with ECM.
Anyone who's on leadership here may have noticed that one of them mentioned how much they enjoy being in leadership in the local church. Well, but let's ask the question, which perhaps is being begged at the moment. Why do we need to be involved in mission in Europe? Some of you will have heard me ask this question before, but I think it's really important that we remember some of these things. Why mission in Europe? So I've written down 4 continents there: Africa, South America, Asia, and Europe. And you might like to just think, perhaps share with the person sitting next to you, what percentage of those continents are evangelical Christians? If you get within 0.01 of the right answer, then I will give you a prize. So Africa, South America, Asia, and don't forget Asia includes China and India in this, and Europe. I don't know how many of you got close to that. 16% of Africans would describe themselves as being evangelical Christians. In South America, it's 18.6%. In Asia, 3.2%. And in Europe, it's 3.1%. That has actually grown over the last few years. So there's good news coming out of Europe. But Europe remains the least evangelized continent in the world. Except, as I say always in this context, except for Antarctica. but we've not worked out how to evangelize penguins yet. Europe needs Jesus. Probably if I were to have asked you, where should missionaries go, you may well have said, well, Africa. Well, the truth is there's more Africans coming to the West as missionaries than there are people from the West going to Africa. And there's very good reason for that. So Europe needs Jesus. But just thinking in terms of numbers, 3.1%, we know that means very few people. But actually, it's still quite a sizable number of people on the continent who are Christians. There are 744 million people in Europe, 69.6 million in the UK, 2024 figures, I think that was. Evangelicals make up 23 million. So that's still quite a good size of people, a good number of people, but it's tiny. Evangelicals in Brazil, one country in South America, 47 million. There are twice as many evangelical Christians in Brazil as there are in the whole of Europe. And ECMI has, I think at the moment, 18, it may be 20 Brazilians working in Europe to bring the good news. And Wellsprings is going to be part of that in just a little while, when I thought I had a picture of them and I realized flicking through I haven't, but never mind, you'll see them in real life in a couple of weeks' time, when Emmanuel and Francine come here for very nearly 3 months to learn the language. Please do speak to them in English, not in Portuguese, just in case you were tempted to do that, and to learn something more about the culture here in Britain, and to be able to use that time to share something of the love of Jesus with people here. So they are two of ECMI's Brazilian missionaries who are working in Europe to bring the good news to the peoples of Europe. And they're going to be here and worshipping and fellowshipping and serving with you from, I think, the 14th of September through to the beginning of December. So if I were going to be here, I'd be really looking forward to that. I'm not going to be here, so hey. But I think you should be looking forward to it anyway. But just look at some of these countries that some of you will know. Kosovo. Has anyone ever been to Kosovo? It's not high on the holiday list. 0.2% of people are Christians. That is a very, very open country to the good news. It's nominally Muslim, but because they want to be part of the European Union, there is freedom of religion there, and it is perfectly possible for people to go from all over the world into Kosovo to bring the good news. So if you wish to learn Serbian or Albanian, then please think about Kosovo as a place that you might like to go. France, Spain. Spain we think of as a holiday destination. Do you also think of it, if you go on holiday there, as a place to pray for? 1.6% of the population in Spain is an evangelical Christian. It's a tiny proportion. The Faroe Islands, I mentioned there, some of you may not know what they are, and the map actually isn't really a large enough scale for you to be able to see them, but trust me, they're at the end of that arrow there. That's where Dorrit comes from, and there's about 33% evangelical Christians in the Faroes. That's a high percentage, but there's only 54,000 people living there, so it's a fairly small number of people. But the Faroes is a great story, and we haven't got time for that now. But the gospel was brought to the Faroes in the late 19th century. And the man, a Scot, who brought it there spent 13 years before he saw his first convert. 13 years. And now, a third of the country is are believers. I think that's one of the things that we need to remember when we think of mission. I know a number of people talk to me about what they call return on investment. If I give $15,000 to this, when will I see the return on my investment? My answer now is in glory. The people who supported that missionary in the Faroes for 13 years never saw the results of what God was doing. We won't necessarily see the results until we get to glory. So let's go to another country where ECMI is working. This is a country that most of us will know, and it is, of course, the country that Philippi is in, and that is the country of Greece. Now, oh, wait a second, I need to go back. I want to say something before that starts. Greece is a fairly new country for ECM. We started there about 3 years ago, and it became a cluster or a team on its own only in 2024. And this video is not so much about what do those missionaries do on a day-to-day basis with non-Christians, but how do they work together as a team? How do they build a sense of belonging as a team in Greece? Because a lot of the missionaries that we have, 2/3 over of the missionaries that we have, come from other countries. You saw that in the video from Romania. They've left behind friends, colleagues, family, homes, often very good jobs in order to go as missionaries to these countries. And it is a very, very lonely place to be. And so this is about how Christians, the missionaries in that team, and the leader especially, Al McInnes, try to create that sense of belonging, that sense of team amongst the workers there.
Welcome to Greece. In autumn 2024, we became ECM's newest cluster. Let me show you a few of the things I get up to in trying to support and encourage our team in the diverse range of ministries they're involved with as we work together to see Christ's kingdom built here.
How things might be in Greece for the gospel in 5 to 10 years. Because for me, one of the really exciting things about ECM is that as we look across Europe, we're working in 25 different countries with more than 30 different nationalities in those teams. And that is a kind of picture in itself. To us? Sorry. Okay, fine. Just move the first half page.
The effort of being in a church context with a lot of different cultures and struggling with that. So you can't have the richness without the effort and the challenge.
We've come to a local cafe today, and we're going to be finishing off something we started a couple of weeks ago, which is called the PDC. Luciana, what does PDC mean?
Personal Development Conversation.
You see what a good team leader I am? My people know what they're doing.
one of the challenges of being a cluster leader is also being a dad and looking after them, and that means making sure they get fed well at good restaurants, but also sometimes you have to put up with hangers-on as well, who end up at your dinner. Cheers, mate.
A little taste of what it means to be building a team of missionaries in Greece. In 2023, when we started there was one couple. And there's now, as you can see, I think it's 7 or 8, and we have 2 other people in the pipeline for going out to Greece, which is very, very, very exciting. So let's return to Philippi, to Greece. Let's stay there for a moment. I think about something else that in that passage we learnt about Lydia. Lydia is not only a woman, but she is, in fact, from what is now Turkey. She is an Asian. She's from a town called Thyatira. And Thyatira is one of the churches that is addressed, as you will know, in the book of Revelation. The first person who comes to faith in Europe is not just a woman, she is an Asian immigrant. That, I think, is, well, for me, is incredibly encouraging, because we have a lot of Asian immigrants coming to Europe at the moment. What is the response of the church as a whole going to be to Asian immigrants? Well, the response needs to be, I think, as far as this story tells us, is that we need to accept, to bring the good news of Jesus to them. Immigration is, in fact, and I know this is political, especially at the moment, so I apologize for this, but in many ways, immigration is one of the greatest mission opportunities Europe has ever known. There are loads of countries where we cannot go as Brits, as missionaries. Many of those countries are sending people to Europe, to Britain, where they can be reached with the good news. The first person who comes to faith in Europe is not only a woman, but she is an immigrant. And you could even say that she is an economic migrant, because she is there in order to sell the cloth that Thyatira was so famous for. That's the first person who comes to know Jesus in Europe, an Asian immigrant. That tells us something about our God, the God who welcomes the outsider, the stranger, welcomes the one who is not always immediately welcomed by us as human beings. That's how the gospel comes to Europe. Let's have a look at another country now. And a country which perhaps we don't think of quite so much. I don't know how many of you have ever been to Austria. Some of you may have been. But Austria is not a tourist destination like Spain or Italy. But, and those of you who know your European rather than just your British history will know that Austria has played a huge role in the history of Europe. Austria was central to so much of what has happened in Europe for centuries, especially in Central and Eastern Europe. And the history there is so different from the history that we learn in schools in this country. So that's where we're going to go now. We're going to go to Austria and see something of the history of one area in West Austria. And it gives you a little bit of a rundown of the way in which mission has changed over the years, but also a little bit about the way in which ECMI seeks to work, which is where we will send in people to start churches And then, God willing, they're able to move on, and that church becomes self-supporting and then able to support its own missionaries. And that's something of the story that we hear in this video.
This is an ECM story from Dornbirn in Austria. In 1965, Gudrun Nessler, a missionary of the European Christian Mission, comes to Dornbirn in Austria, and she works as a kindergarten teacher. In 1971, she initiates evangelistic evenings in Bregenz. The first church services were held in 1972, laying the foundation stone for the church in Dornbirn. Over the next 30 years, a whole series of other ECM missionaries supported the church. Peter and Susie Harrison, John and Anna Adams, Miles Harrison, Tom and Bea Picker. In 1995, ECM sends missionaries to Dornbirn for the last time. Ian and Alison Woolley from Australia. Ian and Alison build up the youth ministry, lead the Sunday school, and Ian assists in leadership and preaching. In 2001, the Woolley family returned to Australia. This is when the last ECM missionaries leave the church. However, the congregation gained stability through their ministry, and young people grew up to become supporting members within the church. From 2006, Stefan and Claudia attended the Sydney Missionary and Bible College in Australia, and other young people followed them to Sydney. Georg and Sandra, Doro, and still others go to England to study the Bible. Benjamin. These young people are sent back to Austria as national missionaries through ECM Australia. In 2012, Stefan is appointed as the first Austrian full-time pastor from their own ranks in Dornbirn. The others also work in various churches in Dornbirn, and all remain connected to the ECM family. And the ECM team is growing. Ross and Shona arrive in Dornbirn in November 2024, and Samuel and Maddie join them in March 2025. Exciting times for the churches in Dornbirn and the ECM team Austria West. And who knows what other people God will lead to Austria to build his kingdom there.
So that's just something of the history of one town in West Austria, from the very first ECMI missionaries to the situation that it's in now. And it was a great joy, I think, for many of us, that at our biennial, our conference back in the spring, Stepan Pohl, whose wife Claudia you heard there, he was one of our main speakers. Someone who came out of that church that was planted all of those years ago through a missionary with ECMI. So God is at work. God does things. He changes people's lives. And that's one story of how that has happened in the west of Austria. So let's just head back to Lydia again. We have already learnt that she's a woman and an Asian immigrant. But we learn something else about her in verse 14, and we learn that she is a worshipper of God. I mentioned that earlier. And that's the description that Luke gives to Gentiles, those who are not Jews, who actually have come to worship the God of the Jews. Cornelius is one of those names that we may recognize would be someone like that. But of course, they're not Jews. They are, again, outsiders. They are outside of the promise that God gave to his people. And yet, because the good news is for everyone, Lydia is brought into that promise. She's adopted into that family. So that the first person who responds to the good news of Jesus is not just a woman, not just an immigrant, but is someone who is outside the promises and has been brought into that through the person of Jesus. That's what God does. God brings people from outside. God welcomes the outsider. He welcomes the people who would otherwise be rejected by their society. And when the good news of Jesus first comes to Europe, that is exactly what happens. Lydia is for me a symbol of what the good news means in the continent of Europe. One other country that many of you will know that we work in, because it's been in the centre of much of the news, but also of our thoughts, is the country of Ukraine. There's some, I think there's some very good news from Ukraine. Over the last 3 months, ECMI has brought on 8 new missionaries, 4 couples in Ukraine. People who are Ukrainian, and they have left their jobs in order to work full-time in the church in Ukraine. And that's building on the work that has been done by ECMI over the years in the north of Kyiv, in the towns of, Nemeshieva, Hostomel and Borodyanka. Some of you will recognize those names. They're very near to Irpin and to Bucha, and they were part of the work that ECMI has been doing there in terms of bringing food and then starting up church plants in those towns. They've now grown to the situation where they need someone working there full-time. They don't have the finances to be able to do that, so we are raising the finances for that. And there is one other couple coming on board in Lviv to join the team of 5 who are already there. I think we should give thanks and rejoice for that type of thing. In the midst of war, God is not only bringing people to Christ, but he is also raising up new workers in the country of Ukraine to reach others with the good news. So as you know, I've travelled to Ukraine on a number of different occasions over the last 2.5 years. I forget how many, 7 or 8, I think. And the last time I was there was this past weekend. I was one of about 500 who were invited to the National Prayer Breakfast in Kyiv, and which was hosted by President Zelensky. So I thought I would just show you a few pictures from that. This is not a particularly well put together video, but hey, you know. The last picture there was of the front of the main railway station in Kiev, which was lit up in the national colours of Ukraine, because last Sunday was the Independence Day, 34 years since the independence of Ukraine after the fall of communism. I think for some people the highlight of the morning, at least talking to others afterwards, was that President Zelensky was there. But that man there, for me, was the highlight, if that's the right word to use. He gave a very powerful testimony. A testimony to God's faithfulness through difficult times. And we probably all think that we have difficult times. But the picture behind him is of his wife and 3 children who were all killed when their home was destroyed by the Russians near the beginning of the full-scale invasion. He was, I believe, on the front line at the time. And he gave a strong testimony to what it means to have faith in God, even through times like that. And for me, that placed the whole of the prayer breakfast in a very real, powerful, and meaningful context. It lasted 3 hours. There was a lot of prayer. There were, unfortunately, some political speeches. But the country is full of people who have known that type of sorrow and yet continue in their faith. And for me, it's one of the great privileges of being part of ECMI, in that I can, in a very small way, bring something of the fellowship and the support that we as Christians in this country have for the people in Ukraine. Please do continue to pray for Ukraine, for the people there, perhaps especially the new missionaries in the towns north of Kyiv and in Lviv. So I'm going to ask